Morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the welcome. It's great to be here, and it's great to follow, I have to say, a fantastic start, or a little daunting. What a fantastic start to the day. And I have to say that I could really relate even to Uncle John and his song. And, you know, there's some things that a man can't fight. It actually nearly brought a tear to my eye, because certainly there are some things that we believe that farmers must fight, and that I as a woman need to fight, and that we as people need to fight. And I've been on a really fantastic journey over the past 5 years, with hopefully a lot more to come. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. And I think a lot of it is about that fight. And it's about a fight for the things that we are all talking about today, with different linkages. So it's about food, and it's about sustainability. It's about, even though thinking about the future, we also need to, I think, look to the past and think about the past and draw from the past if we can when we're thinking about the future. And quite early on in my journey, I came across this old Cree Indian proverb, which is actually quite often quoted now. But it really meant a lot to me, and it really resonated with the community that I was in and that I was working with. And as I travel around the state now, talking to farmers and rural and regional communities right across New South Wales, it really resonates with a lot of those people as well. And we really need to realise that we're talking about food, that we're talking about sustainability, that we're talking about feeding people, and we do have to think a little bit about food or fuel. My story today begins back in April 2006 with the awarding of exploration licence number 6505 over part of 350 square kilometres, actually, of the magnificent Liverpool Plains in New South Wales. It was awarded by the then New South Wales state government to a company called Coalworks Australia, which is actually part of BHP Billiton. The Liverpool Plains, for those of you who don't know it, is a place that I would call naturally blessed. It has very, very deep alluvial soils that have a magnificent water holding capacity. It is underlain by highly productive, high quality aquifer systems. It supplies about 37% of the nation's cereal crops currently, and it is a very tightly held agricultural area. The families that have been there for many generations, 3, 4, 5 and more, and they hope to be there for a lot longer. That's a picture of the magnificent Liverpool Plains. And unfortunately, when we say naturally blessed, of course, the way that geology works, it's not only blessed for agriculture, and I think my friend Nikki Williams often talks about God, if she can, and where God puts things. And of course, underneath these magnificent soils, we also have some magnificent minerals, and predominantly coal. And underneath the soils, we also have a huge amount of coal resource. And unfortunately, landholders in New South Wales really do only own the surface of their soil. And the government owns the rest. Some landholders still retain the right to have both, but very, very few. The Liverpool Plains, in fact, the mineral supplies are so exhaustive that they're talking about 500 million tonnes of very, very high quality thermal black coal. And of course now, these days too, we're talking about coal seam gas. So they're talking about the Gunnedah Basin being the next Hunter Valley. And we see huge expansions of exploration licences and mining licences over this area that grows phenomenal amounts of food and has grown phenomenal amounts of food year in, year out for many, many generations. Back in 2006, when the exploration licence was awarded, I'd come to a bit of an end of my career. I had been doing some administration and some business, and I had taken on some clients. We have a farm, my husband and I have a farm about 50 kilometres west near Premer, and we run the farm with his family. And I also had a business on the side, and I was doing workplace training, and I had some administrative skills. And when the exploration licence was awarded, the community over at Caroona, I had many friends over there, said to me, Fiona, I wonder whether you might come and help. You know, we need to, we're starting up a community group. I just wondered whether you could come and do a few minutes for us, you know, a couple of notes, do something like that, just, you know, just a little bit of time, just attend the odd meeting. And I said, yeah, sure, not a problem. Well, the CCAG, the Caroona Coal Action Group, was born, and I have to say, from day one, I was absolutely hooked. I couldn't believe the process about the awarding of exploration licences, the awarding of mining licences, and how mining trumps agriculture every time. I couldn't believe how food security and food sustainability was not even considered. And I couldn't believe that landholders in this process really have no rights whatsoever, whether it's leasehold land, freehold land, whatever it is. In the eyes of the Mining Act, in the eyes of the government, the landholders really have no right. No right to appeal, no right to object, no right to even be individually told that their land is being put under exploration. If they're lucky enough, they might catch it in the newspaper with a little postage-sized stamp. So there's no appraisal, there's no consideration of what's on that land currently, and there's no understanding of the natural resource assets that might be on that land or under that land. The process in New South Wales at the moment is totally proponent-driven. The process is weighted towards the mining companies. And the more that I worked with this community, the more that we tried to fight this exploration licence, the more appalled I was and offended I was about my sense of natural justice, and what I thought happened in a democracy just didn't actually happen here. And we talk about things such as the precautionary principle being enshrined throughout New South Wales legislation and state legislation, and I think actually even federal legislation. And the precautionary principle, of course, being if you don't know, you don't go. Now, I actually vividly remember the day when I found the precautionary principle, because I'm not a lawyer, I'm a farmer. You know, I have a business background, and I've done a degree, and I think I did 1 semester of law, you know, along with 1 semester of computing and 1 semester of something else. But we were trolling through pieces of legislation. We couldn't believe that this was actually happening, and that the farmers had no rights. And we found the precautionary principle. And we went, hallelujah, you know, you don't know, you don't go, it's all going to stop, everybody will be fine, we can all stop worrying. But 3A, the ministerial discretion clause, actually overrode that. So in actual fact, even though it does apply, even though it is enshrined throughout all pieces of legislation, there was a neat little trick that the government had so that the minister could actually choose not to regard any of that if he wished to, which of course has happened time and time and time again in mining development applications. We worked with the process. So we thought from the very beginning that we needed to fight it, and that we really needed to assert our rights as landholders, first of all, so our property rights and the property rights of the landholders in that district, but also the rights of people to produce food. And we were amazed that the government did not have a focus on that. And as we went along, we started off fighting, and I'm sure many of you would have seen and remember perhaps footage of the Caroona blockade and stories of us attacking BHP Billiton and other miners in the press, and the Minerals Council. As we went along, though, however, what we realised was that it wasn't about the miners, and it wasn't about the mining companies. It was actually, sure, they did some things that were perhaps not quite right, and they could improve their practices and they could improve the consultation. But in actual fact, what the problem was that it was an enshrined problem in the process. We had a process problem. We had a process problem that had been built up over many, many, many years, where mining supersedes all else. And in Australia, when white men first came to Australia, and they were given squatters' licences and property licences, then the government, first of all had to work with the Aboriginals, but then they also had to work somehow or other to give out other licences and tenures to minerals under the ground when we had the gold rush, and when we've continually mined since then. So that's the sort of legislation, that's the sort of idea that is underpinning mining legislation, and that's the sort of idea that is underpinning current process in New South Wales and everywhere else. And that's the sort of process that we had to fight against, we believed, if we wanted to win at Caroona and if we wanted to win in other areas in New South Wales. What we recognised, and we had somebody come along and talk to us, and various experts coming along and telling us what we should do. And one of the things that we were told was that we needed to infiltrate. And infiltrate sounded like a really sneaky word. Farmers, not activists, but I'll talk about that in a minute, but farmers are also not terribly sneaky people, generally. Generally, farmers are a huge big overgeneralisation here, and I'm sure there's probably some sneaky farmers even perhaps in the room today. But generally, farmers aren't very sneaky. They're generally open and reasonably transparent and tend to wear their heart on their sleeve. So the whole notion of infiltrating was really interesting and took us a little while to get our heads around. But after a while, a couple of us sneakier ones in the room decided that we could perhaps do that, and that perhaps if we needed to infiltrate, we could be the ones to do it. And now apologies to vegetarians in the room, and apologies to anyone else who might look like these sort of people as I'm going along. But to infiltrate, we thought, oh dear, that's raising a bit of a tricky question. It might mean that we're going to be activists. And activists look a bit like these ladies here, or even perhaps like that fellow. I don't think there's anyone that looks like that in here, but could be, and apologies if there is. But in actual fact, we decided that we could perhaps be activists. And this is a photo taken at one of our meetings at the Caroona blockade. I then had a look at activists. I thought if we're going to be an activist, we perhaps need to understand what actually an activist is, so that we can actually see whether we perhaps can be one, even though we are a farmer. And the old concise Oxford Dictionary says that activism is the use of vigorous campaigning to bring about political or social change. So I thought, yeah, that's okay. I can live with that. That's what I want to do. So okay so far. And so then I thought, well, really, activists are just ordinary people who want to make a difference. And if you look back at this crowd of people here, there's kids, there's grannies, there's people my age, middle-aged, the middle-aged spread people, there's everybody. We just look like ordinary people. And all those people in that picture are just ordinary people who want to make a difference. So whether or not they call themselves activists, or whether other people call themselves activists, or whether other people call them activists, they are just ordinary people who want to succeed with some change which they believe is for the community good. So when I decided to infiltrate, I thought, where could I infiltrate to? It's all very well to say you're going to do something and infiltrate somewhere, but you have to have somewhere to go. And so I thought really the best thing for me to do was to actually go into some organisations that perhaps I already had some input into, that were bigger lobbying groups that maybe had the ear of government. Because if I wanted to change government, I needed to get in there and get their ear. So I was elected to the Liverpool Plains Council, and then at the same time I was elected to the Executive Council of New South Wales Farmers. I chaired the mining task force of that in 2009, and this year, some 3 weeks ago, I was actually elected to be its president. So the whole role of resources and natural resource management now has a very, very big focus in the association that I lead, and a very big focus amongst its members. My role, I would say, is most certainly challenging, exciting, stimulating, empowering, and very, very personally rewarding. There's nothing like a euphoric feeling of having a win or winning someone over. So activism for me is extremely satisfying. But also at times it can be extraordinarily frustrating. It can be exhausting. It can be overwhelming, and it can be demanding. There are plenty of days when you feel like you're not getting anywhere, and you feel like giving up. And one of those instances I can tell you is when we'd won a court case in the Caroona community, a Supreme Court case that took a lot of effort and a lot of people's times and a lot of money, only to have it overturned by the government not too long after that. And some of those times you think, how can you keep going? How do you get out of bed? How do you keep going? How do you keep moving along? And you just have to, because there's more positives that outweigh the negatives. And also because you have hope. You have a passion and that you have a hope. And you have a belief that you need to try and change the way people do things. A little bit like our other speakers. What if we do nothing? Mining companies, when they submit EISs for mines, for new projects, have to put in this option. What if we do nothing? So what if we do nothing? What if we just sat there and let it all happen? Now, we've currently got nearly 70% of the state now covered by exploration licences and mining licences of one form or another. So there's no provision for boom and bust. There's no provision for balance. We currently have a situation in the state where we are overlooking long-term gains, long-term sustainabilities. We are threatening long-term sustainability and the use of our natural resources for some very short-term gains. And the government are actually in charge. The same department actually is in charge of giving out exploration licences and collecting the royalties. So that's actually where we have a problem. Short-term gains, long-term pain. Currently, legislation in New South Wales does not provide balance. It does not provide upfront assessment of land, does not look at the soils, it does not look at the water, does not look at the aquifer structure. And in fact, we're seeing exploration licences awarded right this very minute where none of these things are taken into account, yet they are approved, particularly for coal seam gas, under something called adaptive management methodology, which is basically suck it and see. You know, let's see if we can do this, let's see if it's going to make a terrible effect, let's see if it has an impact on the aquifers, let's see if it cracks the bedrock or the permiums above, and if it does it, well, we won't do that again. Hopefully we can fix it. Never mind that we're dealing with, you know, structures that are millions and millions and millions of years old. The communities at the moment are excluded. And members, and again, you know, Uncle John's song, you know, some things a man just can't fight. I have so many members, so many people in the communities who feel like that. They feel completely disempowered by this process because they have no say. There is a threat to long-term food sustainability. Australia at this moment produces more food than it can eat. It is in a position of feeding the world. And, you know, we hear the projection, the forecasts of, 9 billion people by 2050. Where is the food going to come from? How are we going to feed the world? How are we going to feed ourselves? Are we happy to import the food here? All these questions we really, really need a debate about in the community. What do we actually need? What I believe we need, and this is the things that I am currently pushing for and lobbying for, we need upfront planning in the state. We need to plan for food security, plan for food sustainability, plan for efficient use of our natural resources so that we can have balanced development. We need to protect our strategic agricultural lands and our valuable water. We need to think about food security and sustainability. You know, the federal government has a minister for it. I think they even have a department for it. But what do they actually do? And we need guarantees to protect generational investment by landholders and communities. You know, so often we hear about sovereign risk in terms of mining development. Well, what about sovereign risk to agriculture? What about these industries that have put in generations and generations of investment that might be threatened by these sorts of development? What about the sovereign risk to food security? Come on. Why do you do it? Why am I encouraging each and every one of you to take responsibility for something that you might feel passionate about? And hopefully you're here today talking about food, talking about sustainability. So hopefully this is something that you might feel passionate about. Activism is about being true to yourself and for something you believe is right. It's about spreading the word and gaining acceptance for your view. Lastly, I believe it's about creating positive change that flows through to governments, that flows through to policies and becomes adopted. Lastly, I started with a quotation, so I'm going to finish with one too. Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go and do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. So I say to everybody, take responsibility, get out there, make sure everyone knows what you're feeling and what you think about security and sustainability, and tell the world. Thank you very much.